But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. Let me tell you about my great God. Hey guys, Pastor Tim here. Hope you guys are ready to get your day started in God's Word. We are on 1 Samuel chapter 29. Really short chapter, which might lead to a really short video. So read it through a couple times. But anyway, if anything, I would tell you guys, connect this chapter back with chapter 27. Because we see here the fallout of David leaning on the arm of flesh. All right, he was doing good before chapter 27, where he's putting his faith in God and he was inquiring of God what he should do in these tough situations and tough circumstances. But in chapter 27, we see his faith start to waver, and then we see he decide, you know what, I'm just going to go to the land of the Philistines. That way I'm not going to die by the hand of Saul. He's no longer trusting in the Lord for his protection and his provision. And now we see the fallout of that decision, because when he goes to the land of the Philistines, it's known that he's there. He has 600 men and their family following him, so it's a large company of people. And King Achish, at first inquires, like, hey, are you going to be trouble for me? And in fact, David says, no, I'll be your help, all right? I'll be like your servant. He submits himself to the enemy king, and he fights some battles for him and stuff as well. And it gets to the point where Achish actually starts to really trust David. And so when the Philistines decide to go in battle against the Israelites, what we see happening in chapter 28 and what makes Saul so scared, Achish brings David and his men with him. He's like, hey, he's like my right-hand guy. I'm going to take him with me to fight this battle. And all the other kings are like, whoa. Hold up. All right, we're not taking this guy with. This is David. Don't you remember the song? And I'm telling you guys, in studying David before, I guess I never thought of it this way, but man, that song the ladies must have sang that made Saul so mad must have been at the top of the charts for like years, because everyone keeps referring back to that song. They're like, isn't this the one of whom the people sang, Saul has slain his thousands, but David his 10,000s? We're not bringing this guy with us to battle. What if he says, this is a prime opportunity for me to get back in the good graces of my king, referring to Saul, and he just turns on us all of a sudden? We're not going to have that problem. So Achish tries to fight it, trying to say, David's been good to me this whole time, but they're like, no, we're not going to have any of that. So finally Achish has to go to David, and he says, hey, I can't take you with me. All right, the guys, they think you're going to betray us. I think you're good. You've done nothing but good for me, but they think you're going to betray us. So in the morning, you're going to have to go home. You can't go into battle for us. And instead of being kind of relieved about this, David says a weird thing, and we're not really given much context to why he feels this way, but he's like, hey, haven't I shown myself faithful to you? Why is it that you're not taking me with you? Very weird statement. I don't know if he was trying to put on a show that he was still faithful to the Philistines just so that King Achish still thinks good of him, but it's a weird thing for him to say nonetheless. But even though this is a short chapter, and I think the best way to get something out of it is to connect it with the previous things that have happened in chapter 27 and David's lack of faith, his faith starting to waver. The main thing, guys, that I can tell you that I got out of this chapter is this: when we lean on the arm of flesh, when instead of trusting in God and we begin to trust in ourselves, it eventually leads us to nothing but trouble. And that's what happens with David here. It leads him to nothing but trouble. And he was about to be in a situation where he has to fight his own countrymen, his own people, the Israelites. And it's only by the grace of God that he didn't have to do that he was spared that situation. All right? Because unless the other kings, if they didn't speak up, David was going to be in a very tough situation. But by the grace of God, God saves who he chose to be the future king of Israel from having to be in this weird circumstance where he had to fight against the people of Israel. All right? But the main thing that sticks out to me, guys, is when you lean on the arm of flesh, when you trust in yourself above God, it leads to nothing but trouble and tough circumstances, like we see David in here. And thankfully, by God's grace, sometimes we're able to escape those situations. Sometimes God allows us to reap the consequences of those situations, but it's only by God's grace that we can emerge out of those situations a stronger Christian, that we can learn things from those situations. But we don't have to get in those situations to begin with, guys. Don't lean on the arm of flesh. Lean on God. Trust in Him so you can avoid these sticky situations, so to speak, just like David had here. That's it for today's chapter, guys. Stay tuned for the last chapter of this week. Sorry that I missed a couple days, but Stay tuned for that. Stay safe, stay healthy. God bless.